Again, feel that we're sitting right at the bottom of the pelvis on those sit bones, so we can rock side to side a little bit. We can rock forward and back and really feel that upright position where our pelvic bowl is upright. And now we'll lay down and do the same thing there as we lie down. So find that triple S with the knees bent. Back of the neck is long. You could have hands right at those pelvic points at the front of the pelvis. And let's rock side to side here. So we're shifting from one hip to the other. And then can we rock forward and back like we're tilting the pelvic points toward the thighs and then tilting the pelvic points toward the chest. So try a couple rocks side to side, forward and back. Find that neutral where you're somewhere right in the middle on the back of the sacrum. Bring a block between the knees or the thighs, and we'll activate the pelvic floor as we sync our breath to the movement. So right now the block is between the thighs, but we're not hugging or squeezing it yet. Let's take a big breath in. Exhale to empty. So work on letting all that breath out. At the end of your exhale, you're gonna hug the block between the legs, curl the tailbone up, lift up one vertebra at a time while we hold that hug. Staying low in your bridge, stay low enough that your shoulder blades and your back ribs are still on the ground. Take a breath in, you can release that hug of the block. Exhale to empty. At the end of your exhale, hug the block between the legs, lower down one vertebra at a time. So let's try that at our own pace. We inhale and just kind of relax. Exhale to empty is when we really engage by hugging the block. Lift up slowly into your bridge. At the top of your bridge, you'll inhale. And exhale to empty when you're ready, hugging the block and then lowering down. So you're going to do that a couple more times, really getting this action of relaxing on the inhale, lengthening, and then exhale is when we want to use the core and the pelvic floor by hugging the block to move the hips. On the next time you lower down, we'll stay there. The block is going to stay between the knees or thighs, but you could always adjust the width to make it a little bit more comfortable, or maybe just slightly change the positioning. We'll have the head down for our core work today with the hands on the ribs. So you could do same hand and same rib. You could do opposite arm and rib. Now let's take a huge breath in with that triple S on the ground. As you exhale, exhale to empty and use your hands to help draw the ribs back in toward the center of the body. Give that block a hug. Inhale, breathe in, relax the hug on the block. When you're ready, exhale to empty, drawing the hands back in, so ribs contract back in, and we hug the block. Inhale, breathe into the ribs. Exhale to empty, use your hands to help contract the ribs back in as we hug the block. Now this time we'll slightly curl the tailbone up and lift the heels up without lifting the low back away from the ground. Lower the heels. Let's inhale, relax that hug, take a big breath in. Exhale to empty, use your hands to draw the ribs back in, hug the block, slightly curl that tailbone, lift the heels. Lower the heels, inhale, let's release. Releasing that block for now. Pick up your right foot and let's point and flex the right foot with the knee as bent as it feels good for the back of the leg. But we want to get those feet and ankles moving. Good, let's cross it over for figure four. Check that the back of the skull, the shoulder blades, and your sacrum, the back of the pelvis are firmly on the ground. Maybe the right hand comes to the right thigh to push it away. Now, if you'd like to wake up the feet a little bit more, which actually helps the pelvic floor too, you can push down into the ball of that left foot, but try to lift and spread the left toes and then lower the toes back down. So you'll push into the ball of the foot, lift and spread the toes. Lower down, that's just an option. You could also just stay and breathe in this figure four. Release that right foot down, left leg comes up as bent or straight as it feels good while we point and flex. So dorsiflexing is when we pull the toes back, plantar flexing is when we point the toes. Cross it over for your figure four. Back of the ribs and the shoulder blades are still on the ground. Left hand can come to the left thigh if that feels good. You've got that option to lift and spread the right toes as you push into the ball of that right foot. Just an option as we breathe here into the ribs, front, side, and back. Hug both knees in. Let's take some of those rocks side to side along the sacrum, so the back of the pelvis, and you can also rock up and down. When you're ready, we'll come into a seated position. And as we sit, can we check that we're sitting on those sit bones right at the bottom of the pelvis, not rocking forward or rocking back. Right arm will reach up. Let's lift that right shoulder blade way up and side bend to the left. You can let that left ear drip down, warming up that right hand and wrist with some fists of fire, opening and closing that right hand. Really breathe into the right side of your ribs. And come back up, left arm up, lift that shoulder blade up, side bend. Let the ear release, open and close the left hand. Warming up that left wrist, left forearm, maybe up into the upper arm. And let's come up. You can shake or roll the wrist. We'll head to quadruped. Now, if you've got a block with you, you can place a block at your sacrum, right at the back of the pelvis to just balance here, helping us hold that pelvic bowl steady so that we can isolate the hips. Align the neck so that the ears aren't dropping below the shoulders or right in line. Soften the chest, draw those pelvic points in. Right toes slide back. Barely float the right toes off the ground, and let's bend the knee. Hold that pelvis still as we externally and internally rotate this right hip. So keep that block balanced on your low back if you have it. Feel your low belly trying to lift up toward the block. Nothing moves except this right hip. Lower that right knee down to quadruped. You can always adjust the block a little bit and we'll switch sides. Picture that broom behind your back, touching the back of your skull, shoulder blades, and sacrum as we slide the left toes back. Right away, lift the belly up toward the block, barely lift the toes off the ground, and we'll bend the knee. Externally and internally rotate this left hip. Get that feeling of those two pelvic points drawing in, straight and strong in the arms. Lower down to quadruped, remove the block. You can come onto fist, you could turn your fingers out to the side, you could stay with the hands right where they were in quadruped, and let's cat-cow. As we inhale, we extend the spine, tipping the pelvis forward, and as we exhale, we round the back, we flex the spine, and tip the pelvis backwards. So let's get as much movement as we can, both directions, moving with the breath. Let's head into downward dog. Tuck the toes, weight stays in the hands, arms stay nice and straight as we lift the hips straight up. Soften the knees, let the heels lift way up high. And we'll pedal the feet out. Just trying to stretch one heel down at a time. But keep the knees as bent as you need to keep the spine long. We're still pushing into the fingers. We're lifting the front ribs in toward the body. Big bend in your knees. Walk the hands back toward the feet. So we're going to lower those heels down into dorsiflexion of the ankles. Push down into the feet. Let's rise up with that long spine. Checking in like we have that broom behind our back. Let's bring one hand to the front of the pelvis, one hand to the back. Keep that pelvis neutral, so not tipping forward, not tucking under. Pick up your right foot. Keep it low enough that we don't tuck the tailbone and round the back. One time we'll externally rotate the hip, bring it back to neutral. Now step the right foot forward. Pick up the left foot. Hold that pelvis still. One time externally rotate, bring it back to neutral, step it forward. Pick up the right foot, hold the pelvis still. Externally rotate, neutral, step it forward. Last one, pick up the left foot, draw those pelvic points in. Externally rotate, back to neutral, step it forward. Good, let's grab that block and we'll put it between the ankles. Give it a little bit of a hug. Hands can, of course, stay at the pelvis. Let's have the knees a little bit soft so that we can get that tailbone down, zipper the pubic bone up, and we'll just hug that block as we lift the heels, push into the big toes, and lower down. So we're keeping that hug on the block in the ankles. That's going to get more activation all the way up the inner legs, up into the inner thighs, up into the pelvic floor. So really keep that pelvis neutral. So don't let the low back sway too much. Lower the heels. Let's get rid of the block and just put it right by our side because we're going to use it again. Reach the arms forward and up. Get those shoulder blades up. Soften the knees. Now hinge at your hips like we're trying to touch belly to thighs without rounding. So knees are super bent. Step back into quadruped, hands and knees. Shoulders over your wrists. Walk those knees in under the hips. Block comes to your sacrum again. So right at the back of the pelvis. You could also be on fists. Let's tuck the toes under, moving with the breath. Inhale, feel the ribs expand, front, side, and back. Exhale, the ribs contract back in. And we hover the knees off the ground. It's a low hover without rounding the back like we're pushing the ground away. And then lower the knees, inhale. Exhale to empty, feel the ribs draw back in, draw the pelvic points in, lift the belly up toward the block as you hover the knees. Lower the knees, inhale one more time. Exhale to empty, hover the knees. Don't lose the block. Good, lower the knees. Let's untuck the toes, bring that block off the sacrum. Right foot will step forward. We're heading into a 90-90 lunge. Left knee slides in, lift up, check in. Ears over the shoulders, over the ribs, over the pelvis. Left glute is nice and firm as we roll one shoulder back at a time. Releasing some tension here in the upper back. The neck, you can gently move the head around, but hold the lower body really active. So we're zippering that pubic bone up, pelvic points draw in as we mobilize the upper back. Hands will come down for quadruped or come to fist. Right leg back, toes face the ground to start, and then we'll bend that right knee. Make sure the left hip is super active so we're not sinking that left hip out to the left. It's right over the knee. Let's pulse the right glute. If you wanted to use the block, you could do the same thing where we put the block on the sacrum here so that we're not dropping the belly and moving the low back. Low back stays long. We're working that right glute and hamstring to extend the hip, holding the pelvis still. So the muscles on the left side of the pelvis really have to stabilize here. Release that right knee down, and let's just do a little swivel of the pelvis like we're drawing circles with the tailbone both directions. Release some of that tension and contraction we were just holding. And now we'll step the left foot forward. Right knee can slide in a little bit. We're in our 90-90. Zipper up. We want ribs stacked right over the pelvis. Right glute is firm. Let's roll the shoulders back. Make these rolls as big as it feels good. You can do some little horse breath or horse lips. Relaxing here. Hands will come down, three-legged quadruped. Left leg back, toes start facing the ground, and then we bend the knee. Maybe the block comes to the back of the pelvis as we pulse this left hip. So the left side's really working to move the hip. So the glute and the hamstring are working. And the right hip and glute and the right side of the pelvic floor muscles are really working to hold the right hip in place. Keep the arms straight and strong. Release it down. If you have the block, you can remove it. And this time we'll wag side to side. So toes could be tucked or untucked. You're gonna wag like a dog, side to side. Kind of just arcing the back side to side. This is lateral flexion. Wag that tail side to side, and then whatever feels good. Down dog, cat cow, maybe a child's pose. Let's walk it forward, bent knee forward fold. Push down into your feet, grab the block as you rise up. Block comes between the ankles again. Give it a hug, let the knees stay soft. Feel that we're not arching the low back here. Tailbone's reaching toward the heels. Hug the block as we lift and lower, any pace. Keeping that gentle hug of the inner ankles into the block, not letting the pelvis move. Push into those big toes. Release the block. We'll have it nearby. Reach the arms forward and up. Shoulder blades up. Soften the knees. Hinge forward like you're trying to touch belly to thighs. Quadruped, and this time the block is going to come between the inner thighs. If you're comfortable, you can bring it up as high as possible. The thinnest way, you can keep it between the knees or lower on the thighs. It's going to help us get that deeper activation into the floor of the core. So let's pause in our quadruped. Same hovers here, but now we're using the block a little bit differently. Inhaling into the ribs. Exhale to empty. Hover the knees. Keep that hug on the block. Spine stays long. We inhale to lower and take a big breath. Exhale to empty. Hug the block. Hover the knees without rounding the back or spreading the shoulder blades apart. So spine stays neutral. Inhale to lower. One more. Inhale. Exhale to empty, maybe through the mouth. Hug the block. Hover the knees. Keep lifting the front of the throat. Lower the knees. Let's remove the block. Step that right foot forward, 90-90 lunge, and we tuck the left toes this time. Zipper up. Keep the ribs in toward the body, right over the pelvis. Hands come behind the skull. Lean your head back. Now we're holding the pelvis still, not turning there. Take a breath in. Exhale. Turn the ribs to the right. Keep the tailbone reaching straight down. Inhale back to center. Feel that expansion into the ribs. Exhale, turn just the ribs to the right. Keep going with your breath. So now the left side of the pelvic floor muscles are really working to stabilize so that the pelvis doesn't turn to the right as the ribs turn. We're isolating just the thoracic spine, using those core muscles to help us rotate. Good, let's lower down. Right leg back, three-legged quadruped, toes face the ground. Lift the belly up, maybe we've got the block on the sacrum. Keep the toes facing the ground as the right leg moves slightly to the right in hip abduction and back behind you. Keep lifting the belly up toward the block. Stabilizing the pelvis and moving this right leg to the right. So we're working the outer right hip muscles and glute muscles. And then getting the inner leg, the inner thighs to work to bring the leg back in behind us. Arms stay straight and strong. Slide that right knee in, remove the block for now. Left foot steps forward for our 90-90. Right toes tuck under, lift up. Tailbone down, pubic bone zips up. Ribs are right over the pelvis. Hands behind the head, inhale. Exhale, draw the pelvic points in, turn the ribs left. Inhale back to center, breathing into the ribs. Exhale, tighten the right glute, turn the ribs left. Inhale, moving at your own pace with the breath. We exhale to rotate. That's when we've got that core engagement. Let's bring the hands down. Three-legged quadruped, left leg back. toes face the ground, block comes to the sacrum, lift the belly up toward the block. Let's make sure that right hip, our bottom knee is super active, not sitting out to the right. Left leg abducts out to the left with the toes facing the ground the whole time, and we bring it back behind us. Abduct out to the left, right side stays really active. Both sides of the waist stay long. It's a small movement with that left leg. Working pelvic stability. Zippering the pubic bone up. Slide it back in. Any option that feels good. Cat cow, child's pose, downward dog. Let's walk it forward into our bent knee forward fold. Push down into the feet, rise up. Okay, let's grab the block if we have it. It's not absolutely necessary. It's just going to help us get a little bit more engagement. Step your right foot back into a high lunge. Zipper that pubic bone up. Legs are super active. So if you have the block, you're just going to palm it between the hands right in front of the chest. Breathe in. As you exhale, squeeze the block between your hands. Tap the right foot forward. Maybe we pick up the right foot. Tap it down. And then step it back. Take a breath in. Exhale, squeeze the block. Transition to that tap forward. Maybe we come up a little higher. Then you can just inhale here. So each time we step forward, let's squeeze the block. Exhaling. Maybe we go right into that balance. So we're using the exhale when we need a little bit more core, a little bit more balance. Good, step that right foot back. We're gonna turn to the right side of the mat, externally rotate the hips. Now the block just comes to the back of the pelvis. Try to rip the block apart. So we're just pulling the block in two. So we're opening the chest, but we're not letting the ribs move forward. So keep those ribs in as we pull the block apart. Let's pulse here. So pulsing into this squat. Keep that block also as a way to keep that tailbone reaching down, not sticking the tailbone up behind you. So the low back is long. If you're feeling really steady here in the pelvis, you can add lifting one heel at a time. You could try to lift both heels as you pulse. Good, feeling light and buoyant. Good, release the block. Let's turn back to the front. Shake out the shoulders a little bit. Left foot steps back. We're in our high lunge, palming the block. Take a breath in. Exhale, hug the block. Give it a squeeze as we tap forward. Maybe we go right to that balance. Inhale on your way back. Exhale, squeeze. Tap forward. Moving at your own pace. We really want to sync the movement. Exhale to squeeze. Get that extra engagement from the core to help. Working that right glute as you push into the right foot to lift. Good, we can remove the block. We're going to step the left foot back and turn to the left. So now we're faced to the other side of the mat, and we're going to side lunge with the breath to get that pelvic floor synced. So we'll inhale, side lunge either way. Spine stays long. Exhale, push the ground away. Lift back into a wide-legged stance. Inhale, side lunge the other way. Exhale, push the ground away, rise up. So we inhale on the way down. We're getting length in the posterior chain, which is the back of the body muscle. So everything from the back of the feet, up the legs, up the back, including the pelvic floor. So the whole backside muscles are lengthening as we inhale. And then as we get back up, exhale, we're using those active muscles to lift, including the pelvic floor. So just think about inhale, we're lengthening. That includes breathing down into the pelvic floor. Exhale, We're using that activity, we're using the core and the glutes to get back up. Let's turn back to the front of the mat for quadruped. Right foot steps out to the right for an adductor rock. Let's give it a little release here. Rocking it back and forth. You could be on fist, you could be on fingertips. You could have your hands elevated on the block. But let's breathe in here and just focus on the expansion. Big breaths in. And exhale, just stay relaxed. Think about a nice active pull along that right inner leg. So we're getting that stretch and pull all the way up into the pelvic floor muscles. Switch sides, left foot steps out to the left. Rocking back and forth. Staying relaxed here, feeling that expansion into the ribs, front, side, and back. Let's come into a seated position. Sit however it feels good. Maybe we're even sitting on the block, making it a little bit easier to sit right on those sit bones. And let's check. Pelvic bowl is upright, ribs are stacked on top. We're going to close our eyes and just bring our fingers to the jaw. You can do little circles. You can just tap or walk your fingertips around, but just find some areas that might feel a little tender, tight, swollen. A good place to check is behind the ear. So right behind the angle of the jaw, and then coming down the jaw can be really tight. You can just do soft strokes, maybe wiggle around a little bit. So one of the ways we can help relax our pelvic floor or not have as much tension there is just relaxing the jaw. So if you find that you're clenching the jaw a lot, just try to be mindful of it and do a little bit of relaxation there, and it will also help you relax the pelvic floor. Now let's go ahead and come onto our backs. And we'll have the knees bent, soles of the feet on the ground. Arms can rest at your sides. You can have hands at the ribs. And just like when we started, let's rock the pelvis side to side, rolling onto one hip and the other. And then maybe rock that pelvis forward and back, pelvic tilts. And you can stay here with the eyes closed. You can hug your knees in and rock side to side. You could take a happy baby. But let's focus on that big breath into the ribs, allowing yourself to stay relaxed as you exhale. A few more breaths here, keeping the jaw relaxed, the forehead,